Everyone talks about the bones, the endless rumors of massive ancient skeletons dug out of the American dirt, sent away to the Smithsonian, and mysteriously lost in dark, dusty basements. But here is the terrifying truth that nobody wants to discuss. We do not need to look for ancient, unproven bones to find giants, because in the late 1800s, there were giants who were alive, breathing, and walking among us. We have the photographs. We have their names. We have their marriage certificates. We are talking about living, breathing human beings who towered 8 feet tall, who tried desperately to build normal lives, and whose bloodlines simply, inexplicably, stopped. They came, they were paraded in front of the world, and then they vanished. Today, we are opening the sealed historical archives to uncover the forgotten generation of giants and the dark, systematic industry that made absolutely sure their lineage was erased from the earth. I found her name buried in a historical archive in Nova Scotia. Anna Haining Swan. She was born in August of 1846 in a tiny farming community. Her parents had immigrated from Scotland and they were completely average in size. Her father was a normal height. Her mother stood barely 5'2". Anna was their third child out of 13. 12 of those children grew to completely normal proportions. Anna did not. At birth, Anna weighed a staggering 18 pounds. By the time she was 4 years old, she stood 4'6" tall. By her 6th birthday, she was looking her mother dead in the eye. By the time she turned 15, she towered over the men of her village at 7 feet tall. When her body finally stopped growing, Anna Swan measured nearly 8 feet in height and weighed close to 400 pounds. She was described by everyone who met her as brilliant and kind. She excelled at literature, she played beautiful music, and she wanted nothing more than to live a quiet life as a schoolteacher. But the world of the 19th century had entirely different plans for anyone who stepped outside the boundaries of normal. Her father had to build custom furniture just so she could sit at the family table. She was completely isolated, and when she was 17 years old, the men in the suits arrived at her door. The most famous showman in history, P.T. Barnum, had been aggressively collecting human anomalies for decades. By 1862, his agents had tracked Anna down in rural Canada. They arrived with a proposal that her poor farming family simply could not refuse: $1,000 a month in pure gold. For a rural family in the 1860s, that sum was unimaginable wealth. Anna accepted the offer, left her home, and moved to New York City to become the Nova Scotia giantess. This is where a terrifying pattern begins to emerge. Barnum did not just put people on display. He systematically hunted them down from across the entire globe. From the hills of Kentucky came Martin Van Buren Bates, a former military captain who stood an astonishing 7'9". From the depths of China came Chang Wu Gao, documented at 8 feet tall, a brilliant scholar who fluently spoke 10 different languages. From the plains of Texas came the Shields brothers, 4 massive siblings all measuring near 8 feet tall. This raises a massive, deeply uncomfortable question. If extreme gigantism is just a random, incredibly rare genetic anomaly that appears maybe once in a generation, how was one single circus owner able to assemble so many of them in one place at exactly the same time? The 1850s through the 1880s represented a period of systematic, ruthless collection. Individuals who could have lived quiet, peaceful lives in their rural communities were targeted, bought, and funneled into a massive, highly profitable industry. They were locked into a system where they could be contained, controlled, and explained away as circus freaks rather than human beings suffering from profound, debilitating medical conditions. Think about what happens to a person's identity when they enter that machine. Look at Colonel Routh Goshen. Barnum heavily promoted him to the public as the quote-unquote Arabian giant, claiming he was born in Jerusalem. None of it was true. His real name was Arthur James Kay, and he was born on the Isle of Man. But his true identity was completely erased and overwritten with a fabricated story just to make him look more exotic to the paying public. His humanity was stripped away and replaced with a marketing campaign. When Arthur finally retired to a quiet farm in New Jersey, his final request was absolutely heartbreaking. He demanded to be buried extra deep in the ground, in a deliberately mislabeled grave. He was terrified that even in death, the crowds would dig up his massive bones to put him in a museum. He knew that the system viewed him as a specimen, not a soul. But the most disturbing piece of this history is not how these giants were collected into circus tents. The true tragedy is what happened when they tried to escape the circus and build families of their own. Anna Swan, the giantess from Nova Scotia, met Martin Bates, the giant from Kentucky, while they were both performing. Two people isolated by their immense size found each other, and they fell deeply in love. They toured Europe together. They met royalty, and on June 17, 1871, they were married in a massive, spectacular wedding in London. It was the wedding of the century for the tallest married couple in recorded history. They wanted out of the circus. They took their money, purchased 130 acres of quiet farmland in Seville, Ohio, and tried to build a sanctuary. Martin supervised the construction of a massive, custom-built house. The ceilings were 14 feet high. The doors were 8 feet tall. They had massive beds built to accommodate their frames and custom chairs where the seats sat 30 inches off the floor. They were building a fortress against a world that stared at them. They were trying to build a lineage. On May 19, 1872, Anna went into labor. She gave birth to a daughter. The baby weighed an unbelievable 18 pounds and measured 27 inches long. But the baby was stillborn. Her body was quietly donated to medical science. 7 years later, in the dead of winter in their massive Ohio home, Anna went into labor again. This time, it was a son. The brutal labor lasted for 36 straight hours, with 2 terrified doctors standing by. The baby weighed 23 pounds and 12 ounces. His chest was 16 inches around. He remains, to this exact day, the absolute largest newborn ever documented in all of human medical history. He lived for exactly 11 hours. Both of those massive children are buried in a small cemetery in Ohio. Anna was completely broken by the loss. Her massive body, pushed to the absolute breaking point by her condition and the brutal trauma of childbirth, began to fail. In 1888, she passed away in her sleep from heart failure at just 41 years old. Martin was devastated. He sold the giant house. He later remarried a woman of perfectly normal, average size, but they never had any children. When Martin died in 1919, his unique, towering bloodline died with him forever. This devastating pattern repeats itself across nearly every documented case of the era. Chang, the brilliant Chinese giant, married an average-sized woman and desperately tried to build a life. He built massive 10-foot-high brick walls around his home in England just to shield his family from the thousands of curious eyes. He refused to walk outside during the day, only leaving his house at night to smoke his cigars under the glow of the gas street lamps. When he and his wife had 2 sons, both boys grew to completely average height. The giant trait simply vanished. When Chang died of heart failure at age 52, his final desperate wish was to be buried in an unmarked secret grave so he could finally be left alone. Why did this happen? Why did these bloodlines end so abruptly? We love to look for massive historical conspiracies. We want to believe that a shadowy government agency deliberately exterminated a race of giants to protect the history books. But the factual, historical truth is actually much heavier and much more tragic. The official medical explanation for these individuals is severe pituitary gigantism. What the circus promoters did not tell the public was that growing to 8 feet tall is a biological nightmare. The human heart is simply not designed to pump blood that high into the air. Their internal organs were under constant, crushing, unimaginable strain every single second of every day. By parading them around the world, forcing them to stand for 12 hours a day in circus tents, the industry was working them to death. And when it came to reproduction, the physical mechanics of a woman of Anna's immense size trying to deliver a 24-pound baby with the medical technology of the 1870s was a recipe for absolute tragedy. The traits did not pass on, and the bloodlines ended, not because of a shadowy assassination plot, but because the extreme limits of human biology simply could not sustain it across generations. The human body has rules, and when those rules are pushed to the absolute breaking point, nature shuts the door. But there was a cover-up. The true erasure did not happen with a weapon, it happened with a pen. When the era of the freak show finally collapsed in the early 20th century, society made a collective decision to erase the humanity of these people. The massive house that Martin and Anna built in Ohio was torn down and demolished. Their custom furniture was sold off at cheap estate auctions as weird novelties. The medical establishments took their immense suffering and reduced them to clinical anomalies, mere footnotes in a textbook. Before the circus industry got its hands on them, a 7-foot-tall person living in rural Canada was just a member of the community. They were unusual, yes, but they were human. After the circus industry, they were permanently labeled as freaks. Their intelligence, their dreams of being teachers, their devastating heartbreak over lost children, all of it was scrubbed away to leave behind nothing but a cardboard cutout of a monster for people to gawk at. We look back at the 1880s, and we wonder where the giants went. We have their photographs. We have their marriage certificates. We have the exact dimensions of the massive chairs they sat in. But we do not have their descendants. In a 50-year window, society found a group of extraordinary, medically unique human beings, exploited them for every penny they were worth, watched their bodies give out under the immense strain, and then threw their history into the shadows. They did not vanish into thin air. They were simply used up, and then they were purposely forgotten.